Hi, my name is Olga and I run Applet Studio. We are a small web design agency and we sell Squarespace templates, web design courses, and we also work with clients one-on-one. The topic that I want to chat with you today is it was really fundamental, instrumental for me when I was growing as a web designer. So in my previous career, I was a journalist, and then I switched to digital marketing and web design when I was about 27 years old. So I could set up a website using WordPress or using a page builder, but I really didn't know the specific theory that is underlying like how you build a website and why you position things this way or that way. So learning about the grid systems and layout grids was this light bulb moment that went in my head, and I was magically able to create much better work. So my goal today with you is to show you how to use layout grids in Figma to recreate the Squarespace grid and show you how you can build your design around this grid to make your design more visually pleasing and professional. Generally, web design is a complex subject. It consists of color, typography, composition, and the fundamentals of web development. So what we're going to talk about right now has to do with composition. Composition is how we place elements on the page so that they look balanced, nothing sticks out, we have enough white space. In order to help us build this composition, we use a layout grid. A layout grid is a system of invisible horizontal and vertical lines that are not present in the finished design, but we place all the elements around this grid. The majority of websites right now are using the modular grid. Module is a little rectangle that has certain width and height, and your page consists of these modules, and you build your composition, you place your content on this modular grid, and as a result, it looks well balanced, nothing sticks out, everything is placed perfectly. When web design as a field was just getting started, you remember that all websites looked pretty much the same. They used the same grid. You had the header, you had the sidebar, and you had the body area, and the whole web was really boring. So then what happened? And the web like we know it right now came to us from glossy press, from glossy magazines and yellow press. So designers that worked for print migrated to digital and brought the rules that are present in glossy fashion print. Glossy magazines are designed using alternating layouts and very clear visual hierarchy and the layout grids. So in order to direct the attention of people, to get them to read the page, to scan it, you had to use the grid. So Squarespace, oh, by the way, you can go to this link, applet.studio/Figma, applet.studio/Figma, and download the file, the Figma file that I'm using, and download the presentation. You scan this QR code. So Squarespace's grid system has 12 or 24 column grid with adjustable gaps. The grid on mobile has 8 columns. Some sections on Squarespace live outside the Fluid Engine grid, so they're not using the Fluid Engine grid, but the grid is still present in them. Each page, pages have adjustable width and adjustable margins, and each section has adjustable margins. And for your reference, the breakpoints on mobile 667. Breakpoint for tablet is 1023. The tablet version is showing the desktop design, but the mobile header. And the desktop is everything that's over 1024 pixels. So let's head over to Squarespace and Figma and see how it all works in practice. I'm inside Squarespace website that I just created. Let's go to Site Styles. It's under this button. And let's go to spacing. Okay, unable to retrieve sections, doesn't matter. Under spacing, what I love about Squarespace is that you can set up page width. So you can set up the width of your website. And also you can set up this site margin. Site margin is this little space that we have on the left and on the right. 4VW means it's 4% viewport width. So whenever my width of the viewport is going to calculate 4% and give it to me here. So let's say it's 6%. Page width can be as small as you want it to be, but I usually start my designs at 1200. 1200 is considered industry standard, but I feel like technology is evolving and it's a little too small right now. A lot of default Squarespace designs start with 1800. So 1800. So this way, when we resize our site, we resize it, and there's a moment when it flips to tablet view. So this is the tablet view. It's the actual desktop design, but with a mobile header. And then it switches to mobile view at some point. So if I go into any section, so let me save it, exit, and click edit again. If I go into any section and I press G, it's going to show me the layout grid, the modular grid. If we go to edit section tools, so we see that we can manipulate the gap, we can remove the gap completely or add the gap, horizontal and vertical. So by default it's 11, and we can also change the margin of the section, so add spacing at the top and at the bottom here, or remove it completely. If you remove fill screen, it's going to remove this gap completely. So how do we translate this to Figma, and why would we do that? So let's head over to Figma and recreate this grid in Figma. So if you're not familiar with Figma, it's a very easy to use graphic design tool that was created specifically for web design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a frame. A frame is like artboard in Illustrator. So I'm going to create a frame, and I'm going to start with a desktop frame, which is going to be 1440 pixels. So this is my desktop frame. It doesn't matter if like you're looking at this site. I'm looking at it on a huge screen right now, and I know that default space setting that I have is 1800. So when I'm creating this, like this is the industry standard too, 1440. So I know that my margin at the left and at the right is 6% viewport width. So let me bring up the calculator and calculate. So I have 1440 times 6%. So my margin at the left and at the right is roughly 86 pixels. So I'm going to create a layout grid. I'm going to click layout grid, and instead of grid, select columns. And I need 24 columns with a margin of 86, and my gutter is 11. So here you go. If I view this on a 1440 screen, this actual grid will look like this. And then I can play with the gutter. So gutter can be 10, for instance, a little smaller. And then on top of that, I can also create a vertical, like a horizontal grid. But I'm not usually doing that. I can add rows. So what's my margin? Let's say my margin is 100 pixels. And my gutter is 10. And the row count is... So I'm just guessing the row count, actually. I can actually calculate it, but I'm guessing it right now. 20. So something along the lines of this, the actual grid. So let me disable the rows. I'm gonna click this button with an I to just like disable it for now. So what I'm gonna do around this grid, I'm gonna, build my design actually. So I know that I'm gonna have an image here, for example. Let me make it bigger. So I'm gonna have images and text. And I am going to build everything around this grid and around power lines. So I know that I need to have symmetry in my design. So I'm going to bring up a ruler. I'm going to place it in the middle here. So let's say I have power line here at the left. So I need everything aligned around this line here at the center. And then I'm also going to need one more here and here. So let's say I'm building my layout like this. I know that my header logo is here, and here I have a button of sorts, right? So then I'm adding rectangles, but you know what I mean. These can be shapes of text and images and so on. So then I might have something like this. 4 columns. Then I will have a bigger section. And so on, you get the idea. So when somebody is scrolling through this design, they see that everything is aligned. So this element is aligned with this. This element is aligned with the header, and with this element, and with this element. So nothing is sticking out. And then you just build your design with alternating layouts this way around your grid. You can do a lot of things with a grid on Squarespace. So if I start resizing this, you will see that the margins stay the same. The gaps between these little modules stay the same, but the modules themselves are responsive. So if we go here to the gap and add a little bit horizontal gap, we can turn them into squares even. They're not like exactly square, but this is something that we can do. This is for the case when you need more space between elements. So if you need to place several elements next to each other and you just need more gap between them. To make everything aligned and visually pleasing, you need everything to be, like if you want to have 3 items here, you would need to make them bigger, like so. And then you can manipulate the gap between them. So on Figma, it would look like this. So let me duplicate it and remove everything. So changing the gutter to 30. So this is the design with the bigger gaps. Let's also take a look at the mobile version. So I'm going to create a frame for a phone. I'll pick a bigger phone. Let's say it's for iPhone 14. And let's add a layout grid here as well. So it's going to be columns 8 with gutter of 11 and margin of 60. Okay, so my viewport width is 430. So let's 430 times. So my actual margin is going to be 25 pixels. So there you have your mobile grid. Also, let's look at the classic editor grid. I'm going to create a new frame again for desktop for 1440 and add a layout grid, columns, 12 columns. So Classic Editor has 12 columns and margin 86, and the gutter is 34. Why 34, you ask? Let me show you. So if I go here and I add a new section with the Classic Editor, so let me add an image here, just any random image from the library, just like any image. And one more image. And I'm going to put them next to each other and bring up the Chrome inspector to see the gap between them. Like, what's the default gap between them? So let me save this, exit, and there is an extra element hiding. Exit, inspect. This is my image. So you see the padding, the default padding for the element is 17, and each element has a padding of 17, which means that we get 34 pixels padding for all of them. And this padding is static, it's not responsive. So this is what we have on desktop for Classic Editor. And then for Classic Editor, we can also change the margin on the left and on the right. So if I click Edit Section, you see I can set up the section height and the section width. So if I set the section width at 100%, it's going to give me my exact width of the website. So if it's bigger than my desktop, it's going to give me my desktop minus the width that we set up right here. Spacing, site margin, which is called site margin. And if I change it, so let's say I want, instead of 100, I want to have 80%. 80%. Why would I want to do that? Maybe because I have some sections that stick out from my regular layout for interesting effect, and I want to make them smaller, and then I'm going to align them together too. So if I have 80 in this case, here I'm going to have, so I have 1440 page width, so minus 20%, so 10% on each side. So this means 1440 times 16, so 230. Yep, so that's how it's going to look like. And the width of the columns is changing automatically. So the type is stretch. This is the right type. If I set it to center, I would have like control over the width. But this is not how Squarespace is behaving. This is like the Figma stuff. So if I set them to stretch, they're going to follow how Squarespace will behave on this size of desktop, given that we have such settings here. Here is my final tip for you. We know that when we are resizing the design in Squarespace, all the margins stay the same, but the actual module, this little rectangle, is responsive. So how do we make sure that something that looks good on desktop looks good on tablet as well? So here's my tip, something that I found is working really well. You need to use a bigger page width. So start from 1800. So if you want to create this complex layer design, or like this long scrolling design with a lot of design elements, use a bigger width so that you have room. So when it resizes, when everything, resizes, it has more room to, jump around, let's say. Okay, I hope this was helpful. You can download all the materials on my website here. Go to applet.studio/Figma or scan this QR code, and I'm gonna be here answering your questions.